Hey everyone. Looks like a few of you are on here, but we're gonna wait just a second longer. My time isn't quite ready, but we'll give everyone a minute longer to join in. Can everyone hear me all right? Those of you that are already here? Right, let's see here. Okay, it's almost time. Perfect, thanks Patrick. Good to hear that you guys can hear me. All right, so I think it's time. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Wes Larson. I'm a bear biologist. This is an Earth Live lesson. I want to thank my friend Lizzie Daly for inviting me to talk a little bit about my career. I have been working in bear biology since 2012, so it's been like 8.5 years now. I started with polar bears up in the northern part of Alaska. And then I switched to black bears, American black bears, which I'm still working with both species to some extent. And then I did recently start working with sloth bears over in India, which are a bear that lives in that part of the world, mostly on the Indian subcontinent. And they're a bear that not too many people are familiar with, so we will talk a little bit about them. I want to just talk a tiny bit about my career. I didn't really ever picture getting into wildlife biology. I was always just completely obsessed with wildlife. It was everything to me. But as I grew up, I kind of thought, okay, I need to get a normal job where I'm making a decent amount of money and enough to support a family, or to just kind of live the lifestyle that I thought I would have, just kind of very comfortable lifestyle. And then I went into some professions like that and just really hated it. And kind of took a step back and looked at what I was passionate about, which was wildlife. And then I found a professor that was working with bears. I really just kind of wouldn't leave him alone until he gave me a shot. So that meant I was like going to his office almost every other week until he finally gave me a job on a polar bear project. And then after him giving me that job, I proved myself in the field. And then he gave me a position as a master's student. And I worked on my master's in both polar bears and American black bears. And I got that finished a couple years ago. And now I'm essentially a freelance wildlife biologist. I also host a series for Great Big Story. That series is called Mission Wild. And it's a series where we kind of look at different wildlife projects around the world. And through that series, I kind of got put in touch with Lizzie, and we got to talk a little bit about our respective professions. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I kind of wanted to tell you guys a bit about what it means to be a bear biologist. I think people, look at Instagram or some of the other content that I've posted, and they imagine it as being always in the field, always, up to your neck in bears. And really, the field work is so fun, and I've been really lucky to have some pretty incredible field work. But a lot of it too is sitting in an office and writing reports and trying to dig up money and figure out ways to get research funded. And so you kind of have those two parts of it. And the field work tends to be about 25%, 20 to 25% of my time. And the rest is office work. But as far as field work goes, I've been really lucky. I have been able to go out and collar black bears. I've gone out in the Arctic on snowmobiles looking for polar bear dens. I've seen the northern lights more times than I can count. I've crawled inside black bear dens to sedate them inside the den. I have a photo here. I'm not sure if you guys, oh yeah, you can see that all right. That's me inside a den with a black bear, about to sedate that bear and pull him out and change his collar. And that was about a 30-meter den. So I was in there about 80 feet for you Americans. So that was a really scary experience. One of my scariest, actually. Let's see. I'll show it to you guys one more time, and I'll show you kind of the end result of that. But yeah, all the way inside there with him, and then he came all the way out, and I had to sedate him out on the snow, which wasn't the easiest thing. So that's me with him after having sedated that bear. So the life of a bear biologist can be a little hectic at times. It can be, it can be dangerous, but it's not. It's probably not as dangerous as people imagine it to be at the same time. And then one thing that is really great about that field work too is that I do get the chance to sometimes hold cubs while working with their moms, and we have a couple photos of that too. Here's me with kind of two brand new cubs that had just been born, and their mom was sedated, so I got to take care of those cubs while we were working on mom. So there are some really cool experiences that I've got to have, and I'm super lucky for it. So today we're going to talk about a few things, but I wanted to talk about the different species that I've worked with and give you guys a bit of basic information about bear ecology, bear identification, and bear safety. So we're going to kind of be, this is going to be kind of targeted towards the North American audience because those are the bears that I've worked with mostly. But a lot of this information is good for any bear species that you might encounter, especially the safety aspect. So pay attention because there's so much information out there about bear safety. And I know a lot of you people, whether you're kids or you're adults or whatever, you're going to be out in the woods. And it's really important that you know what to do if you do see a bear. So I'm going to go over some of the basic differences between the bears. And I have a couple skulls to help illustrate those differences. So this is a black bear skull. As you can see, it's a pretty small skull. This is a smaller bear. It's our smallest North American bear. And unlike the grizzly, which I'm going to show you here in a second, black bears have a really straight profile to their skull. So when you see a black bear in the wild, it's going to have kind of that straight face, almost like a dog. And there's not really a dished in shape to their nose. And that's a really good way to tell these bears apart. So if you see a black bear or a brown bear, color isn't the best way to do it, even though their names are black and brown. Black bears can be brown bears can be black. So really color isn't the best way to look to distinguish the two species. So the best way really is this facial structure, looking at their nose. And if you see kind of that flat dog-like face, it's going to be a black bear. Black bears also generally have bigger ears, and they have less pronounced of a hump on their shoulders. So those are some good ways to tell them apart. Now we'll look at our bigger of the two species that you might get confused. And this is a grizzly bear. So this is actually a Kodiak Alaska bear. This was a bear that was killed by a rancher right before I visited the area, and that rancher allowed me to take the skull and clean it myself, which was quite the job. And then I got to bring it home. So you can see this is a much bigger animal. And you can also see where that black bear just kind of had that straight across profile on the top of its head. The grizzly has much larger of a dip right here. And that's kind of they call it a Roman nose or a Greek nose. But it has this more dished in face. So if you see a bear that you see kind of more of a dish right here on its snout, it's a much better chance that that's going to be a grizzly. And they actually do have smaller ears. They have a much bigger pronounced hump on their shoulders. And yeah, they do tend to be larger as well. But that's also not the best way to tell them apart. Okay, I don't have a polar bear skull. What I do have is a polar bear print. This is a print that we took off of a bear that was sedated. It shows you how big their paw size actually is. So they're a really big bear. Polar bears are actually the largest of all the bear species. The males get up to 1,500 pounds. The females are right around 900. And brown bears can actually get that big, or grizzly bears. Brown bear and grizzly bear is the same thing. And this is a print from a grizzly that was taken in Alaska. You can see it's also a really big bear, and they have these really impressive claws that they use for digging. So that's a bit about each of the bears. We're not going to get too stuck in the bear ecology because they're so different that we could talk about that for hours. What I really did want to talk to you guys about before we get into some questions are bear safety and learning a bit about what you do if you encounter a bear in the wild. My kind of emphasis has been on human-bear conflict. So I know a lot about bear safety and kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of the messages that are out there and how they can be a little confusing. So there's a lot of information. Even the National Park Service here in the States has a lot of conflicting stuff, and it's tricky to know exactly what you should do if you see a bear in the wild. So we're going to talk about both black bears and grizzly bears, because if you live in North America, those are the bears that you're most likely to encounter. If you live in Europe, chances are the only bear that you're ever going to run into in your life is a brown bear. So you guys will want to pay attention to the brown bear stuff. If you live elsewhere in the world, it's probable that you're close to brown bears still, but North America is the only place that has North American black bears. So if you're in the woods and you come across a bear, you want to treat it like it's a dangerous bear. So if you know it's a black bear versus a grizzly bear, that's great. That's helpful information. But my kind of information that I like to tell people is if you're in grizzly country and you know you might be running into a grizzly, you should definitely treat every bear like it's a grizzly. So what you want to do is the first thing is group up. So if you're with multiple people or with dogs or whatever, you want to get that group as tight as possible. Bears don't like to interact with groups of people. They see groups of people as a much bigger threat to their safety, and they just don't attack groups. So if you're with multiple people, group up. The next thing you're going to want to do is get your bear spray out. So I'm actually going to grab a can of bear spray here to show you guys what that looks like. So bear spray is essentially just a big can of mace. What you do is you pull this tab off, and then that's the safety, and then you just depress this plunger, and that shoots a 30-foot, about 12-meter cloud of bear spray. And that mace is so terrible for the bear. It chokes them, it blinds them, it destroys their sense of smell for a little bit, so they just hate that. They want nothing to do with it, and they get right out of there. So you get your bear spray out. That's the number 2 thing. If you're in grizzly country and you're not hiking with bear spray, you're making a big mistake, because it's really the best tool that you can use to stop any kind of bear attack, whether it's a black bear, a grizzly bear. It would stop a mountain lion attack, it would stop a moose attack or a moose charge, and it would also stop people. So it's really a great tool to have if you're out in the woods, especially if you're out by yourself. So I'm going to slip this safety tab back on. All right, so bear spray is number 2. Number 3, you want to slowly back away. So any of the bear species, if you just slowly back away from them, they're probably just going to leave you alone. They're going to see that you're not a threat and not mess with you anymore. So again, those 3 tips are group up, get your bear spray out and get it ready, get that little safety tab off, and then slowly back away. With just about any of the bears that you encounter, that's going to work. So a little bit of difference between black bears and brown bears. Brown bears are very territorial animals. So these are grizzly bears. They're the ones that if you surprise them, or if they have cubs, or if there's, if they're on a kill, they are going to make sure that they defend that territory. So with them, it's really important that you have that bear spray, because they're much more likely to come at you and charge, because they are so territorial. And every animal has this fight or flight response, and they're much more of a fight animal. Now with black bears, they're very shy. They don't want anything to do with us. They typically hate any kind of human conflict. So when you see a black bear, chances are it's just going to run off. Bear spray isn't quite as essential with them, but there is the occasional black bear that decides that a human might be a meal, and those are the ones that you're definitely going to want your spray for. So that's a bit of information about bear safety. There's so much stuff out there, but the 3 things to remember again are to group up, to get your bear spray out and get it ready, and then to slowly back away. There's a lot of other stuff you've probably heard, and none of that, some of it's possible that it'll help you, but those 3 things that I just taught you are the 3 things that are sure to help, because they are proven to be effective. So that's a little bit about bear safety. I do see we have a question here. It says, do you get scared when you see bears in the wild? I do not. I absolutely love bears. I think they're one of the most kind of majestic, beautiful creatures. I have a very healthy respect of them. If I see a grizzly bear in the wild especially, I'm going to give it a lot of space. I'm going to make sure that it doesn't feel threatened by me. But I think those are experiences that you should really do your best to enjoy and to cherish. And if you're too afraid of them, then you can't have that experience. So I'm not afraid of them. I do think I know that they're an animal that can do a lot of damage to me. I know that they're a potentially dangerous animal. So I do hike with my bear spray. I make sure that I'm very careful. But because of the understanding that I have of their behavior, I'm not very scared of them. We've got another question. Where are the best places to see bears? So that's a great question. If you're looking at bear viewing, grizzly bears are generally kind of the most predictable and easiest to find. And that's because there are spots in the world where they feed on salmon. And these salmon streams, the salmon come back almost every year like clockwork. And so the bears are there, they're waiting for the salmon. And there's some really amazing opportunities to go and view those bears as they're eating salmon or as they're looking for some other food sources. So there's places in Alaska. One of my favorites is this little tiny town called Hyder, Alaska, that has a creek that you can literally drive up to, hop out, and there's a bear viewing platform, and you can watch the bears hunt for salmon. But honestly, there's dozens of places in Alaska that have really great bear viewing opportunities, British Columbia as well. And then some of my personal favorites, which aren't quite as easy, are Yellowstone and Glacier National Park, both of them in Montana and then Wyoming as well. If you really do your research and you kind of look at the best spots within those parks to find bears, and you drive around at the right time of day, which is either dawn or dusk, you have a really good chance of seeing bears in those parks. Every single year I go to Yellowstone, and every single year I see bears. Okay, we got another question. Are bears protected? Are there any wild bears in the UK? So depending on the species, they are protected. In the UK, there are no longer wild bears. There did used to be wild bears in the UK, but they aren't there. The closest that you're going to have bears in the UK are going to be in France and Spain, where there are some brown bears left. Now, whether or not they're protected, it really depends on the population you're talking about. Here in the United States, our brown bears in the lower 48, so the non-contiguous or the contiguous US, those bears are protected. Now up in Alaska, you can hunt them. So it really depends on what the population is and how they're doing. There are species that are just flat out protected. So panda bears, there's nowhere in the world that you can hunt or kill a panda bear. Sun bears are probably the same way. There's a few different species where they just have kind of an overarching protection. Okay, we have a question. Hey Wes, will there also be a season 2 of Mission Wild? So there actually is a season 2. It's out. It is available if you just get on YouTube and Google Mission Wild, Great Big Story. There's 2 seasons up there, and hopefully there'll be a third once things get a little bit more normal in the world. We got time for maybe one more question if there's one more question out there. I don't see any. Okay. Well, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how important science is to me. Like I said, I had kind of gone down a different path with my profession, and it wasn't giving me the kind of fulfillment that I needed. And really, science does give me that. It makes me care about the world. It makes me see the world in a different light. And the more I learn about animals, the more I learn about the natural world, the more it's just impressive to me. And the thing that makes me so passionate about bears is the fact that they're this emblem of the wilderness, and that when you're protecting bears, you're actually protecting these huge, areas of wilderness, and they need wilderness to survive. And I think wilderness is something that's incredibly important to human beings, and it's something that helps us get in touch with different instincts and thoughts and feelings that a lot of us suppress in kind of our city lives. So protecting bears for me is protecting that kind of part of the human condition. And I think it's really, really important that we think about that. And that goes for a lot of animals. When you're saving those species, you're also saving their ecosystems and their habitat. And I think that's really an important thing. So I'm almost out of time. Sorry, I wish I could get to the rest of the questions, but I just wanted to say thank you to Lizzie for having me on her live stream and talking about the different things that she's had all these different professionals to talk about. And if you guys want to learn more about my work and my work with bears specifically, you can follow me on Instagram. My handle is @GrizzKid. Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in. It's been really great talking to you guys, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Earth Live lessons. Thanks.